So I've been a Windows user for, well, forever. It's the operating system I grew up with, the one I built my workflow on, and honestly, the one I never really thought to question. It just works, or at least it mostly works. The constant updates that seem to change things for the worse, the bloatware that creeps in with every new PC, and that feeling that my computer isn't truly mine. It's a walled garden, and Microsoft holds all the keys. The curiosity had been building for years, fueled by countless comments telling me to just try Linux. I've always been intrigued by the promise of ultimate control, open source freedom, and a cleaner, faster experience. So I decided it was time to finally do it. Not just dabble, but really commit. I set a challenge for myself, 30 days, Linux only. My goal wasn't to declare One OS the definitive winner. Instead, I wanted to understand the reality behind the hype. Could a lifelong Windows Power user actually make the switch without pulling their hair out? Getting Pop! OS installed was surprisingly easy. Like, shockingly easy. The installer was clean, modern, and held my hand through the whole process. It was arguably faster and more straightforward than a fresh Windows installation. Within about 15 minutes, I was looking at a brand new desktop. And my first thought was, okay, this is clean. The interface was minimal, elegant, and refreshingly free of clutter. There were no pop-ups asking me to sign into a dozen different accounts. There were no ads for apps I didn't want. It was just a blank canvas. The initial setup for Wi-Fi, display settings, and audio was incredibly intuitive. It felt familiar, like a hybrid of macOS and Windows, but with its own unique identity. It was a solid first impression that immediately put some of my anxieties to rest. But then came the first real challenge: software. My entire workflow is built on a specific set of tools, and I needed to find their Linux equivalents. The Pop Shop, which is their version of an app store, was a great starting point. I found a lot of what I needed right away. But when it came to the big one, the Adobe Creative Suite, I hit my first major wall. There's no native version of Premiere Pro or Photoshop for Linux. I'd heard a lot about DaVinci Resolve for video editing and GIMP for photo manipulation, so I installed them. For my daily work, the transition was a mixed bag, but leaned surprisingly if not better, on Linux. Managing emails felt identical, if not better, on Linux. Browsing the web felt identical, if not better, on Linux. With a clean install and no background bloat, my browser felt incredibly responsive. Everything just loaded instantly. Using LibreOffice instead of Microsoft Office took a little getting used to, but for writing documents and basic spreadsheets, it was perfectly capable. The real test was video editing. I committed to learning DaVinci Resolve, and honestly, the performance was stellar. Playback was smooth, even with 4K footage. Rendering times felt on par with Premiere Pro on Windows, likely thanks to Linux's excellent resource management. When it came to entertainment, things got a bit more complicated. Watching YouTube was flawless. Netflix worked flawlessly. Streaming music worked flawlessly. But gaming, that's the big question mark for many people. I was genuinely shocked at how far Linux gaming has come. Thanks to a tool called Proton, built into Steam, I could install Windows games with one click. Cyberpunk 2077 ran beautifully. Elden Ring ran beautifully. It wasn't perfect, though. Games with aggressive anti-cheat software simply refused to run. Valorant refused to run. Destiny 2 refused to run. This is the biggest hurdle that keeps Linux from being a complete gaming replacement. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. I definitely hit a few walls. My first major roadblock, my professional DAC. I plugged it in and nothing. No recognition. On Windows, that'd be a driver download. On Linux, not so simple. I dove into troubleshooting, hours on forums and wikis. The language was dense. ALSA, pulse audio, kernel modules. I nearly gave up and considered the motherboard audio. The fix required the terminal and editing a config file. I had to tell the audio system what my device was. I copied lines of code from an old forum post, saved, rebooted, and the DAC was recognized. The sense of accomplishment was massive. I had fixed it myself. Lesson learned. On Linux, you often are your own tech support. The community helps, but you must research and use the command line. Next problem, system aesthetics. Customization is powerful, but a rabbit hole. I installed GNOME tweaks. I added extensions. Suddenly, the desktop acted weird. The dock disappeared. Animations stuttered. The GUI crashed. Hard reboot. Conflicting extensions were the culprit. Classic beginner mistake. Too much, too fast. I got methodical. Disable all, re-enable one by one. I read about GNOME and stable extensions. ArchWiki, subreddits. Those resources are treasure troves. After 30 days of living exclusively in the world of Linux, the time came to boot back into my main Windows 11 PC. I was expecting to feel a sense of relief, like returning home after a long trip. But what I actually felt was jarring. The first thing that hit me was the sheer amount of visual noise. The start menu was filled with recommended files and apps I never use. The taskbar had widgets and chat icons that I had never asked for. Notifications started popping up immediately, urging me to sign in here, update this, and try that. After a month of digital silence on Linux, the constant chatter of Windows felt overwhelming and intrusive. It was like going from a quiet library to a crowded shopping mall. Performance was the next big shock. My Windows machine is a beast, packed with top-of-the-line hardware. Yet it felt sluggish. Animations seemed different, but it was noticeable, especially after my brain had been calibrated to the snappy responsiveness of Pop! OS. I found myself getting impatient clicking on an icon and waiting for that split second for something to happen. The most frustrating part of the return was dealing with updates. Within minutes of booting up, Windows informed me it needed to restart for a mandatory cumulative update. There was no "I'll do it later" option that would actually stick. This was in stark contrast to the control I had on Linux, where I updated the entire system with a single command whenever it was convenient for me. So after 30 days, what's the final verdict? The journey was genuinely transformative. Linux isn't just for developers anymore. For most daily tasks, browsing, office work, high-end video editing, the performance gains are real. Less bloat, a breath of fresh air, and the level of control you have is second to none. The initial learning curve is definitely there, especially if you need alternatives for professional software or unique hardware. But the challenge is part of the appeal. Solving those problems yourself creates a deeper connection to your machine. My advice is simple: just do it. But do it with the right expectations. Don't expect a perfect drop-in replacement on day one. Pick a beginner-friendly distribution like Pop! OS, Ubuntu, Linux Mint. Be prepared to learn. Don't be afraid of the terminal. It's your friend. Most importantly, embrace the community. When you hit a wall, someone has likely documented the solution. So, the big question, did I stick with it? The answer is yes and no. For my main editing rig, where I need guaranteed compatibility and Adobe, I'm still on Windows. However, I permanently converted my secondary PC. It's now my dedicated machine for writing, research, testing. I find myself using it more and more. And now I have the best of both worlds.